Recorded Books and One Click Digital present A School for Brides, a story of maidens, mystery, and matrimony. By Patrice Kindl. Narrated by Bianca Amato. Chapter 1. Mark my words. If something drastic is not done, none of us shall ever marry. We are doomed to die old maids, banished to the seat farthest from the fire, served with the toughest cuts of meat and the weakest cups of tea, objects of pity and scorn to all we meet. That shall be our fate, as long as we remain in Lesser Who, said Miss Asquith. Extravagant as Miss Asquith's mode of expression was, her fellow scholars at the Winthrop Hopkins Female Academy could not help but feel that she had a point. They nodded in solemn agreement, and Miss Victor, who was only 12, began to cry. The other young ladies frowned and attempted to turn and regard Miss Victor with disapproval at her outburst. This was rendered difficult by the fact that all 8 were bound to backboards, wooden devices that forced their necks and spines into an erect posture. The backboards required them to rotate their entire upper bodies when they wished merely to turn their heads. "Oh, I do beg your pardon, Miss Evans," said Miss Asquith. "I'm afraid I struck you with my crosspiece." "Not at all," responded Miss Evans, and then pivoted, mindful of her crosspiece, to regard Miss Victor with some severity. "Control yourself, Miss Victor, and do not wail so when your elders are conversing." "Yes, Miss Evans," said Miss Victor. The backboard prevented her from using her handkerchief, and her tears therefore continued to flow unchecked, albeit in silence. The young ladies, ranging in age from 12 to 19, had planned to while away their daily hour of posture training with a chapter of The Castle of Otranto. However, by a minor mishap, Miss Asquith, who had been reading it out loud, had lost her grip on the novel, and it had slipped out of her reach. Although the book remained on her lap, her attempt to recapture it was frustrated by the fact that the backboard pinned her elbows to her waist. Cautiously, Miss Asquith had leaned forward and read all the way down to the bottom of the right-hand page, arriving at the passage at which the virtuous Isabella attempts to repulse her amorous father-in-law. "Heaven itself declares against your impious intentions." "Heaven nor hell shall impede my designs," said Manfred, advancing to seize the princess. Here Miss Asquith halted. She was obliged to leave off at this tantalizing moment, being unable to turn the page. After some moments spent speculating on the events likely to occur after such a fearsome line, they began thus to discuss their future. "Perhaps one of us should consider marrying Mr. Cruikshank," mused Miss Asquith. "He reminds me of a dear little leopard frog dressed in green and black. He leaps about so, you know, when he's teaching us to dance. And I believe he's a single man." Her fellow scholars erupted into nervous laughter. "Really, Miss Asquith," said Miss Evans, "I know you speak in jest, but I certainly hope that no one here would so forget what we owe our families as to consider bestowing our hand on a music master." "Quite right, Miss Evans," replied Miss Asquith. "I had much, much rather bestow my hand on Robert the footman." Here several of the ladies erupted into very unladylike shrieks. Unable to cover their mouths with their hands, they struggled to suppress their merriment. Even Miss Evans allowed a brief smile to cross her face. Robert the footman was a very handsome young man. "Ladies, may I ask what is occasioning such a noise?" Miss Winthrop, one of the founders of the Winthrop Hopkins Academy, had appeared in the doorway of the library, drawn by the sound. "Good afternoon, Miss Winthrop," the young women chorused. "Nothing, Miss Winthrop." "No doubt Miss Asquith
Sample complete. Ready to continue?